is Joe Matthew.
Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power. It's great to have you on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite radio, and on YouTube, where you can always find us. Search Bloomberg Global News. You'll find our live feed waiting for you with an empty chair here in the studio every day as we talk politics from Washington and keep tabs on the markets in New York. We're going to cross both of these into one conversation right now with our pal Nathan Dean, because the idea here, and it's been a minute since we've had a chance to talk to Nathan, about a Kamala Harris presidency brings a whole new line of questions to the investor. And Nathan, through his position here as a senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, is the guy who gets the calls, and his calls have been coming in. The phone's been blowing up, as I mentioned. We wanted to talk about the questions that Nathan's been getting and the answers he's been delivering here, because there's still great uncertainty. Even though we are told by the administration there is no sunlight between them, it might not be that simple. Nathan Dean, great to see you. It's never that simple, is it?
No. And look, I think the one way you could say is at the macro level, there's this narrative that Kamala Harris equals Joe Biden in terms of policy. Mm-hmm. We've always taken the approach that that President Biden, when he came into office, moved closer to Kamala Harris's policies than she did to his. So yes, you will get a continuation in terms of regulations and so forth, with the absence of really two factors. One, we think there's going to be more focused on consumer protections. If you go back to her time as Attorney General of California, she participated and partly led a $25 billion settlement against the big banks in terms of home foreclosures. And so I think there's going to be, like, if you're at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or maybe the Federal Trade Commission, they're going to let the folks go a little bit further than where they have now, real focus there. Now, on taxes, I don't think Vice President Harris really wants to change the tax narrative. Look, we have these Trump-era tax cuts that are expiring at the end of... Yeah, but I don't think she's going to want to raise taxes all that much. So from the tax perspective, I think it's a little bit more industry-friendly.
Are banks terrified then?
No, I don't think banks are terrified. I think banks are just cautiously looking at this. And I think a lot of it also depends on the vice presidential pick. Mm-hmm. Because there's this narrative that Kamala Harris is trying to go to the moderates right now to appease moderates and get a little bit more support in terms of the election. If that's the case, then you would potentially see a more moderate regulatory regime, but we still don't know, because, SEC Chairman Gary Gensler is going to be at the helm for a year or so if she wins. Jerome Powell is going to still be at the helm at the Fed if she wins. So I think of the regulatory regime, the banks are just still wait-and-see mode.
Fascinating. Of course, she's not a prosecutor any longer. But the campaign also wants to pitch itself that way, right? This is the prosecutor versus the convicted felon. And it's hard to have both when you want people to look back at your record in California.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, she has some records in California that I don't think would serve her right now. I mean, there's a lot of, actions that she's done in terms of, I want to say just in terms on crime. And right now, with the border being such a key issue, I think that's one of the considerations why she's looking at certain vice presidential candidates. Mm-hmm. However, what I will say to clients is that this election really comes down to two things: trade and tariffs. Tariffs and taxes. Okay. When it comes to taxes, we think she's going to be very continuation of the Biden policy. I just talked about that in a minute. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to tariffs, you're not going to get this 60% tariff threat that you are getting under President Trump. You're certainly going to have more targeted tariffs, but there is a binary choice when it comes to the tariff discussion.
Does that make her more or less friendly to Wall Street than Donald Trump then?
Well, it's this idea of this economic populism movement that's going through the Republican Party at the moment. And so I think that, Wall Street really doesn't know what they're getting with President Trump at the moment, because President Trump will even say, for example, he spoke out to the energy execs and just said, look, you should vote for me. I'm going to help you. Yes. Drill, baby, drill. But then on the same side, you have Senator J.D. Vance out there, the vice presidential nominee, saying things like, I'm going to be big tough on big tech, and I'm going to try and take down some of these bigger companies.
Call Lina Khan.
Exactly. So I think there's still just a wait-and-see mode. I think a lot of it depends. Wall Street's really looking at that tax argument, though, and I certainly think they're going to be looking to see what Kamala Harris's corporate tax policies are.
You said taxes and tariffs, right?
Yes.
So if the tariffs are inflationary, Wall Street says, well, hold on a second. We're just solving inflation now. This could grow worse than a Trump 2.0.
Yeah, but I think Wall Street is also cognizant of the fact that, we have a joke at BI, when you're on the presidential campaign trail, you use poetry. When you get to the president, it's pros, And so I think what they're saying right now on the campaign trail, I want to put a 60% tariff on all imports from China, could be different than what you get when you're actually in the White House. So I think the Wall Street investor is certainly cognizant of the fact that President Trump is saying this, but maybe somewhat hopeful that when he actually, if he were to win the presidency, they would be able to influence and change his mind.
You mentioned crypto here, and Donald Trump had an interesting weekend talking about it. I want to ask you about this whole idea of the Trump administration being more friendly to crypto. We understand Kamala Harris has had some outreach to the industry, but let's go back to this crypto conference in which Donald Trump planted his flag, remembering that he was a crypto skeptic when he was in the White House. Here he is now.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
Okay, so the crypto capital of the planet, presumably Earth, we're talking about here. What would happen to make us the capital? I've heard references to all Bitcoin mining happening here in the USA. Does Michael Saylor care where your Bitcoin's mined?
No, I think, in the same speech, he said he was going to fire Chairman Gary Gensler.
That's correct.
He can't do that. No,
that's how you led me into this, by the way. So Gary Gensler will not be there if Donald Trump's reelected.
No, well, he can't fire Gary Gensler, but honestly, I don't think Chairman Gensler is going to stick around and fight that. It's customary for the SEC chair to move over. But President Trump will do two things if he's elected for crypto. One is he will push Congress to actually move forward with bipartisan legislation in terms of bringing forth a crypto framework. Now, Senator Stabenow over the Senate Ag Committee has even said that she's going to have her own legislation out in the next week or so. It'll be different than what President Trump, but he'll push for it. He'll also push for a new SEC chairman to write rules on the crypto space. We just had Dan Gallagher, former SEC commissioner and chief legal officer at Robinhood, on our podcast. He said that if he was chairman of the SEC, that would be one of the first things he would do is writing new rules on crypto. President Trump could appoint somebody to do exactly that. So if President Trump wins, you will most likely get a very favorable crypto framework. If Kamala Harris wins, it's still up in the air. Bloomberg News was reporting that she's seeking a reset with the crypto industry.
That's right,
but, we don't really know what that reset means.
But it sounds like a Trump administration would be all in to make life easier for crypto investors. It would be an easier environment to operate in, based on everything you're hearing.
Well, I would also caution to any crypto investors that are looking at this, there's a difference between the Wild West and what this legislation, this bipartisan legislation that's making its way through Congress. You are going to get regulations. And so this, if it's not going to be free Wild West, there are going to be costs associated with it.
But hasn't the whole narrative been crypto's begging for regulations? We just don't want to get called into Gensler and be fined $2 million.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the way most of the crypto work, platforms like Coinbase, for example, and so forth, they would prefer to be regulated by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission because they take a principles-based approach towards regulations. Essentially, if I meet the principle of the rule, I'm good. If I'm over at the SEC, it's prescriptive, which means I have to cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and the crypto world really doesn't want to do that.
And you're probably already in trouble if you're talking to the SEC. Am I wrong?
Well, if you're talking to the SEC, as it's proven over the last couple of years,
come on in and register.
Thanks for coming in. Here's an enforcement action for not talking to us.
And Trump did speak to that, right? That this would be, he would essentially reverse the role of the SEC in this framework. I wonder if we need to hear more from Kamala Harris on this, if only by way of donation. She's going to want to be fundraising from the crypto industry, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, I think Kamala Harris does want to reset with the crypto folks. And I certainly think that she will embrace this legislation that is moving forward there. So I actually have decent hopes for a crypto bill coming out in the 2025, 2026. The challenge that Kamala Harris has is Elizabeth Warren. And Elizabeth Warren has a lot of issues with the crypto space, but she also has an AML bill out there that she wants passed over the line. And so I think Kamala Harris is going to have to do some negotiations with Senator Warren.
See, giving you exactly what to watch here on Balance of Power. Basel III, it's not even come up yet. A Kamala Harris administration means what?
So I think Jerome Powell said it the last time he testified that they're going to repropose a portion of the rule. Essentially, they kicked the can to 2025 on this. It's not going to be finalized next year. If Kamala Harris comes in, I think you're going to see further work done on that reproposal. For the listeners, just as a reminder, the proposal came out, 19% increase on capital requirements. We ultimately estimate it will be around 7 to 10%. Additional tweaks, though, if she's in store, but I still think it will be around that 7 to 10%.
Trump 2.0, we never talk about it again?
Trump 2.0, it goes by the wayside,
There's
and
no Basel III.
we don't see it again.
Wow. See, now, if you called Nathan Dean as his client, that's the conversation you would have had. We get to bring it to you here every week. It's great to see you. Thank you.
for having me.
I can't wait to hear the questions next week. Reporting for Bloomberg Intelligence Analyzing, I really should say, our chief policy analyst, Nathan Dean.